The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched far beyond what most eyes could see. Thousands of different alien species filled the seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that would have amazed any human visitor. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Krell, his tall reptilian body covered in dark green scales that seemed to shimmer under the bright lights. Krell raised his clawed hand and the chamber fell silent. His yellow eyes swept across the audience as he began to speak in the universal translation language that all species understood. "My fellow beings of the galaxy," Krell said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Today we discuss the final conquest that will complete our domination of this sector. The humans of Earth and their small collection of worlds represent the last obstacle to our total control." A series of clicks and chirps came from the insect-like Manthari delegation. Their leader, Commander Vex, stood on 6 legs and spoke through mandibles that moved rapidly. "The humans are weak," Vex declared. "Our scouts have watched them for many cycles. They spend their time talking instead of fighting. They negotiate instead of conquering. They fear violence and prefer to solve problems with words." The crystalline beings known as the Luxari chimed in with their musical voices. Their transparent bodies caught the light and threw rainbows across the chamber as they spoke in harmony. "The humans have had countless opportunities to expand their territory," the Luxari sang together. "Yet they remain in their small corner of space. They have shown no aggression toward any species. They appear to lack the warrior spirit entirely." More voices joined the discussion. The gas-dwelling ethereals floated in their containment suits and spoke in whispers that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. The rock-like granite collective rumbled their agreement from their heavy chairs, designed to hold their massive weight. All agreed on one thing: humans were peaceful to the point of weakness. They were soft beings who had grown comfortable in their safe space and would surrender quickly when faced with real military force. What none of these alien species knew was that high above them, in the observation deck that visitors rarely used, sat Captain David Martinez of the Human Diplomatic Corps. He had arrived that morning on what was supposed to be a routine trade negotiation mission. Instead, he found himself listening to the galaxy's most powerful military alliance planning humanity's destruction. Martinez kept his face completely neutral as he recorded everything through the tiny device hidden in his uniform. His training had taught him never to show emotion during intelligence gathering, but inside his mind was racing. The aliens had completely misunderstood what they had observed about humanity on Earth. 3 days later, President Lisa Chun sat in her office, deep beneath the capital city. The underground command center had been built decades ago during humanity's early expansion into space, when they first realized they were not alone in the galaxy. The walls were lined with screens showing data from human colonies spread across dozens of star systems. Defense Secretary Marcus Webb entered the room carrying a datapad with the intelligence report from Martinez. His weathered face showed the kind of concern that came from years of military experience. "They're planning to move against us within 6 months, Webb reported as he handed over the datapad. "The Vorthic Empire has convinced the other species that we'll surrender without a real fight." President Chen read through the report carefully, her expression remaining calm despite the gravity of the situation. When she finished, she set the pad down and looked up at Webb with eyes that held decades of careful planning. "Perfect," she said quietly. "Everything is proceeding exactly as we hoped it would." Webb nodded, though his expression remained serious. "The deception has held for 50 years. They truly believe we're a peaceful species that fears conflict." "And why wouldn't they?" Chun replied. "We've been very careful to show them exactly what they expected to see. Every diplomatic contact, every trade negotiation, every cultural exchange has reinforced their belief that humans are non-violent by nature." The truth was far more complex than the aliens realized. Humanity had indeed spent the last 50 years avoiding major conflicts and preferring diplomatic solutions. But this had not been due to fear or weakness. It had been a carefully planned strategy designed to make potential enemies underestimate human capabilities. while humanity prepared for the war they knew would eventually come. During those 5 decades of apparent peace, every human world had been quietly building military infrastructure. Shipyards had been constructed in hidden locations throughout human space. Weapons research had continued in secret facilities that appeared to be civilian science stations. Most importantly, the human military had been studying every aspect of alien warfare, learning the strengths and weaknesses of every species they might one day face in battle. "How many ships do we have now?" Chin asked, though she already knew the answer. 17,000 combat vessels of various classes. Webb replied, plus support ships, logistics craft, and the special project units. Every human colony has contributed resources to the fleet, just as planned. Shun stood and walked to the large display screen that showed a map of human space. Red dots marked the locations of hidden military bases and shipyards that the aliens knew nothing about. Blue lines showed the patrol routes of scout ships that had been secretly mapping alien territory for decades. And our intelligence network? In place and fully operational. We have assets throughout Vorthok space and monitoring stations watching all major alien military installations. When they move against us, we'll know about it before their own commanders receive their final orders. The president nodded with satisfaction. The plan that had been set in motion by her predecessors was finally reaching its completion. Humanity had learned from Earth's history that the best way to win a war was to make sure your enemy never saw you coming. What about the Special Forces training programs? Chun continued. Completed last month. Every human colony now has trained. Military personnel who appear to be civilian administrators, farmers, and factory workers. The aliens will be expecting to face a desperate militia when they invade. Instead, they'll encounter professional soldiers who have been preparing for this exact scenario their entire lives. Chun smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. It was the smile of a predator who had successfully lured prey into a trap. Excellent. Begin Phase 2 preparations immediately. I want all fleet commanders briefed on their final positions within the week. When the Vorthok arrive expecting to find frightened civilians begging for mercy, they're going to discover that humans have never feared war. She paused and looked directly at Webb, her voice becoming deadly serious. We've simply been very good at hiding what we become when someone forces us to fight. As Webb left to carry out his orders, Ching remained alone in the command center, surrounded by the screens that showed humanity's true military strength. The aliens thought they were about to conquer a weak species that preferred talking to fighting. Instead, they were about to face an enemy that had spent 50 years studying their weaknesses while carefully concealing its own strengths. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to make enemies underestimate them until it was far too late to matter. The Vorthok war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. Admiral Thaxon stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought called Dominator, and studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. His fleet consisted of over 300 warships, the largest military force the Vorthok Empire had ever assembled for a single operation. Sir, we're detecting human vessels throughout the system, reported Lieutenant Zex from his position at the sensor station, but they appear to be scattered and unorganized. Many are showing civilian markings. Thaxon's reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. The intelligence reports had been correct. The humans were obviously unprepared for serious military action. Their ships were spread out instead of formed into proper battle formations, and many appeared to be converted civilian vessels pressed into emergency service. Open a communication channel to the entire system, Thaxon ordered. Let's see how quickly these peace-loving humans agree to surrender. The transmission was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every human vessel and station would receive it clearly. Thaxon's voice carried the arrogant confidence of a predator addressing prey that had no chance of escape. Humans of the Sol System, this is Admiral Thaxon of the Vorthok Imperial Fleet. Your territory is now under our control. You have exactly 10 minutes to surrender unconditionally, or we will destroy every ship and station in this system. We know you prefer negotiation to violence, so make the intelligent choice." The response came not from a panicked civilian authority or a desperate military commander, but from a calm female voice that seemed completely unimpressed by the Vorthek threat. "Admiral Faxon, this is Fleet Admiral Rebecca Torres of the United Earth Space Navy. You are in violation of human territorial sovereignty and guilty of threatening civilian populations. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and leave this system immediately." Faxon's laughter echoed across his bridge, joined by the amusement of his officers. The human commander sounded as if she actually believed she was in a position to make demands. "Admiral Torres, you seem to be confused about your situation. Our fleet outnumbers yours 3-1. Your scattered ships cannot possibly stand against our concentrated firepower. Surrender now, and your civilians will be spared." "Admiral Faxon," Torres replied, her voice carrying an edge that suggested something dangerous was about to happen. "Your intelligence about human military capabilities appears to have been somewhat incomplete. Allow me to provide you with a more accurate assessment." The 30-second deadline expired at exactly that moment, and the Sol system suddenly became a very different place. What the Vorthak had identified as scattered civilian vessels suddenly revealed their true nature. The cargo ships shed their outer hulls to expose heavy weapons arrays. The mining platforms around the asteroid belt activated massive railgun batteries that had been disguised as ore processing equipment. Most shocking of all, dozens of asteroids themselves began to move, revealing that they were actually camouflaged warships that had been lying dormant until this moment. But the transformation was not limited to revealing hidden weapons. The seemingly disorganized human ships suddenly moved with precision that took Faxon's breath away. Every vessel knew exactly where it needed to be, creating interlocking fields of fire that turned the entire system into a carefully designed trap. "Sir, we're reading over 800 human combat vessels," Lieutenant Zex reported, his voice rising with panic. "They were using some kind of advanced stealth technology. Our sensors completely missed most of their fleet." "That's impossible," Faxon snarled. "Our intelligence reports indicated they had fewer than 50 military ships in this entire system." Admiral Torres' voice came through the communication channel again, still calm but now carrying an undertone that reminded Faxon of a predator toying with wounded prey. "Your intelligence was based on what we wanted you to see, Admiral. Humans have always been excellent hunters. And the first rule of hunting is never to let your prey know you're there until it's too late to escape." The battle began with a coordination that defied everything the Vorthak understood about space combat. Human ships moved as if they were all part of a single organism, each unit instinctively knowing where the others would be and what they would do. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no wasted motion. Captain Alex Rivera, commanding the heavy cruiser Predator, led a squadron of 12 ships in a flanking maneuver that brought them around behind the Vorthak formation. His voice was calm and professional as he coordinated with the other squadron leaders. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Predator. Beginning attack run on target cluster 7. Wolf Squadron, adjust your approach to cover our exit vector." "Copy that, Predator," came the response from Commander Sarah Blake aboard the destroyer Relentless. "Wolf Squadron in position. All units, remember the briefings. These ships are built for honor duels, not coordinated pack tactics. Use that against them." The Vorthak ships were individually powerful and well-armed, designed for the kind of formal combat that their warrior culture preferred. But they were completely unprepared for the way humans fought. Instead of meeting them head-on in honorable combat, the human ships struck from multiple directions at once, concentrated their fire on single targets, and disappeared back into the swarm before the enemy could respond effectively. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than we can target the enemy," reported the Vorthak tactical officer. "They're not fighting like a military force, they're hunting us." Faxon watched his displays in growing horror as his carefully planned invasion turned into a nightmare. The humans weren't just defeating his fleet, They were dismantling it with surgical precision. Every time his ships tried to form up for a proper battle line, human squadrons would appear from unexpected angles and tear holes in his formation. All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance, Thaxon ordered. Reform the fleet and prepare for a coordinated assault. But Admiral Torres had anticipated this move as well. As the surviving Vorthik ships tried to pull back and regroup, they found their escape routes blocked by human vessels that had been positioned for exactly this moment. "Admiral Thaxon," Torres said over the communication channel, "I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about human nature. Your species values individual honor and formal combat. We value results and the survival of our pack. What are you?" Thaxon asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We're what happens when a persistence-hunting species develops advanced technology and decides to protect its territory. Your scouts observed our diplomatic behavior and assumed that represented our true nature. They were wrong. Captain Rivera's squadron had completed its attack run and was already moving to assist another group of human ships that were engaging the Vorthik reserve forces. His tactical officer noted that enemy resistance was collapsing more quickly than their most optimistic projections had predicted. So, the enemy fleet is requesting permission to withdraw from the system, the communications officer reported. Rivera considered this for a moment, then opened a channel to Admiral Torres aboard the command ship Apex. "Admiral, Predator Squadron has eliminated its assigned targets. What are your orders regarding the enemy withdrawal request?" Torres' response was immediate and decisive. "Negative. These ships came here to conquer human worlds and threaten human civilians. They don't get to leave until we're satisfied they understand the consequences of that decision." The battle continued for another 2 hours, though it could hardly be called a battle by that point. The Vorthak fleet was systematically reduced to a handful of severely damaged ships that posed no threat to anyone. Only then did Admiral Torres allow them to send a distress signal and begin rescue operations for their survivors. When Admiral Thaxon was brought aboard the Apex as a prisoner, he found himself face to face with a human commander who looked nothing like the peaceful diplomat he had expected. Torres was clearly a professional soldier who had spent her entire career preparing for this exact type of conflict. "Admiral," Torres said as Thaxon was escorted into her ready room, "I want you to carry a message back to your empire when we release you. Tell them that humans don't fear war. We simply prefer not to reveal what we're capable of until someone forces our hand." Thaxon looked at the human commander with something approaching respect mixed with terror. "What message should I give them? Tell them that Earth's children have grown up, and we've inherited our ancestors' hunting instincts along with their technology. Tell them that any species that threatens human worlds will discover that we make very dangerous enemies." Torres paused and looked directly into Thaxon's eyes, her expression completely serious. "And tell them that what happened here today was just the beginning." The colony world of New Haven hung in space like a blue and green jewel, its peaceful appearance masking the horror that had unfolded on its surface over the past 3 weeks. The Vorthak occupation force had taken control of the planet's major cities and was holding nearly 2 million human civilians as hostages. Believing this would force Earth to negotiate rather than fight, they had badly miscalculated what happens when humans decide that someone has crossed a line that should never be crossed. General Patricia Stone stood in the briefing room aboard the assault carrier Vengeance, surrounded by the commanders who would lead humanity's response to the Vorthak's mistake. The holographic display showed detailed maps of New Haven's surface, marking enemy positions, civilian shelters, and the locations where the Liberation Fleet would strike. Stone's expression was carved from ice as she addressed the assembled officers. Gone was any pretense of the diplomatic courtesy that humanity had shown to alien species for decades. What remained was something far more dangerous, something that the Vorthik Empire was about to experience firsthand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stone began, her voice carrying a cold fury that seemed to fill the entire room. "The enemy has made a fundamental error in judgment. They believe that taking hostages will make us hesitate, make us negotiate, make us weak. They're about to learn what actually happens when someone threatens the human pack. Colonel Maria Santos, who would be leading the ground assault forces, leaned forward in her chair. Her face bore the kind of scars that came from years of combat experience, and her eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had seen the worst that war could offer. "What's the real mission, General?" Santos asked. "I assume we're not just here to rescue civilians." Stone's smile was completely without warmth, the expression of a predator that had cornered its prey and was preparing to demonstrate why it stood at the top of the food chain. "The mission is to teach the galaxy a lesson about what happens when you threaten human civilians. We're going to show every alien species watching this conflict that there are consequences for crossing certain lines." The briefing continued as Stone outlined the assault plan. The Vorthak defenders expected a cautious approach designed to minimize civilian casualties, the kind of careful military operation that their own honor-bound culture would have conducted. Instead, they were about to face something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare. Commander Jake Morrison, leading the orbital strike teams, studied the tactical displays with professional interest. His unit specialized in the kind of precise, coordinated operations that had made human special forces legendary, among those few alien species who actually understood what they were capable of. "Sir, the enemy has positioned their forces in and around civilian areas," Morrison reported. "Standard military doctrine would suggest a siege approach to avoid collateral damage." "Standard military doctrine," Stone replied, "assumes you're fighting an enemy that shares your cultural values about civilian protection." The Vorthak just demonstrated that they don't share those values. That changes everything. The truth was that humanity had spent decades studying alien military psychology, learning how different species approached warfare and what they considered honorable or dishonorable conduct. The Vorthak Empire built their entire military philosophy around individual combat prowess and formal battle formations. They expected their enemies to fight according to similar codes of honor. They had no concept of how to deal with an enemy that fought like a pack of wolves. The assault began before dawn, New Haven time. The Vorthak commanders in their fortified positions waited for human forces to announce their presence with formal challenges or demands for surrender. Instead, they discovered that their communications networks had been quietly infiltrated and shut down during the night. Colonel Santos led her troops through the underground tunnel systems that the human colonists had built for emergency evacuation. Her soldiers moved in small groups, each team knowing exactly where the others would be without needing constant radio contact. They had trained for this type of urban combat for years, learning to fight as a coordinated unit even when separated. Across a wide area. "Alpha team in position," Santos whispered into her com as her squad reached their target building. "Enemy strongpoint identified. Beginning infiltration." "Copy that, Alpha," came the response from Captain David Park, leading Beta Team 3. "Blocks away. We have eyes on the secondary target. Coordinating our assault with your timeline." The attacks began simultaneously across the entire city. Human soldiers appeared in locations where the Vorthak had thought they were safe, striking at communication centers, supply depots, and command posts with precision that seemed impossible given the urban environment, but what truly terrified the Vorthak defenders was the way the humans coordinated their attacks. Every human soldier seemed to know instinctively where their teammates were and what they were doing, creating a web of mutual support that the enemy couldn't break or predict. Major Elena Rodriguez, fighting through the enemy's outer perimeter, spoke into her com as her team cleared another building. "The enemy's falling back toward the central district. They're not adapting to our tactics." "That's because they're still thinking like individual warriors," General Stone replied from her command ship in orbit. "They can't comprehend fighting as part of a true pack. Every human child learns teamwork from birth. Every human instinctively understands that the group is stronger than any individual." The Vorthak had built their defensive positions based on the assumption that attacking forces would come at them directly, using overwhelming firepower to break through their lines. Instead, the humans flowed around strong points like water, always attacking from unexpected directions and never giving the defenders a chance to form proper battle lines. Captain Lisa Chun, leading her squad through the residential district, where many civilians were being held, demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking that made human soldiers so effective. Instead of trying to storm the buildings where hostages were kept, her team systematically eliminated the Vorthok patrol routes and supply lines, isolating enemy positions until they became untenable. Sir, we've cut off enemy access to sectors 7 through 12, Shun reported. Their forces in those areas are now trapped without supplies or reinforcement routes. Excellent work, Captain, Santos replied. Continue the pressure. Don't give them time to regroup or establish new defensive lines. What the Vorthok commanders couldn't understand was that every human soldier on the planet was operating according to the same basic principle that had made their species successful hunters for thousands of years. They worked together instinctively, each individual contributing to the success of the pack without needing detailed orders or complex coordination. The battle for New Haven lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the surviving Vorthok forces found themselves surrounded by human soldiers, who had appeared from directions they hadn't even known were possible. The enemy's carefully planned defensive positions had been systematically dismantled by an attacking force that seemed to think and move as a single organism. General Stone accepted the Vorthok surrender in the central plaza of New Haven's capital city, surrounded by the civilians who had been held hostage for 3 weeks. The alien commander who handed over his weapon looked at Stone with something approaching awe mixed with terror. How? The Vorthok officer asked. How did you coordinate such a complex operation without any apparent central command? Stone looked at the alien with the patience of someone explaining something obvious to a child who had missed the point entirely. We didn't need central command because we've been hunting as a pack for millions of years. Every human soldier knows instinctively how to work with every other human soldier. We don't fight as individuals seeking personal glory. We fight as a family protecting our own. She paused and looked around at the liberated civilians, her expression softening slightly as she saw children running to reunite with their parents. Your people made the mistake of threatening our pack. You thought that would make us weak and hesitant. Instead, it made us something that your species has never encountered before. What's that? The Vorthok officer asked. Stone's smile returned, cold and predatory and utterly without mercy. It made us angry. As news of the New Haven liberation spread throughout the galaxy, alien military analysts struggled to understand what they had witnessed. The humans had defeated a superior force in fortified positions using tactics that seemed to defy conventional military theory. What they didn't understand was that humans had never fought according to conventional military theory. They fought according to instincts that had been refined over millions of years of evolutionary pressure, instincts that turned every human soldier into part of a larger organism that was greater than the sum of its parts. The galaxy was beginning to learn that when humans went to war, they didn't just bring better weapons or superior technology. They brought something far more dangerous, the pack mentality of apex predators who had never forgotten how to hunt. The Vorthok Empire had controlled nearly a quarter of the galaxy for over 2,000 years, building their power through conquest and maintaining it through the fear their military forces inspired in other species. Their generals had studied every form of warfare known to galactic civilization, and their fleets had never experienced a defeat that they couldn't eventually reverse through superior numbers or advanced technology. That was before they encountered humanity's greatest weapon, something that had nothing to do with ships or guns or tactical brilliance. The humans had brought something to galactic warfare that no other species possessed: the ability to never give up. Admiral Thaxon, now commanding the defense of the Vorthok homeworld after his humiliating defeat at Earth, stood in his war room, surrounded by tactical displays that painted an increasingly desperate picture. Red markers showed human fleets throughout Vorthok space, appearing and disappearing like ghosts that could not be pinned down or eliminated. Sir, we've lost contact with the Kepler Defense Fleet, reported Commander Vex, his voice carrying the exhaustion that had become common among Vorthak officers over the past 6 months. That's the 10th major fleet we've lost since the humans began their offensive. Thaxon studied the displays with growing disbelief. The human attack pattern made no sense according to traditional military strategy. Instead of concentrating their forces for major battles, they seemed to be everywhere at once, striking targets throughout the Empire and then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. How many ships do they have? Thaxon asked, though he had asked the same question dozens of times over the past months. Our intelligence estimates keep changing, sir. Every time we think we've identified their full fleet strength, new human ships appear in sectors we thought were clear. It's as if they're building vessels faster than we can destroy them. The truth was even more disturbing than the Vorthak military leadership realized. Humanity had spent 50 years not just building ships, but creating an entire industrial infrastructure designed for prolonged warfare. Every human colony, every space station, every mining operation had been quietly converted into part of a vast military machine that could continue producing weapons and supplies indefinitely. Captain Sarah Blake, commanding the destroyer Persistence as it stalked a retreating Vorthak battle group, explained the strategy to her crew as they prepared for another engagement. Our ancestors used to hunt animals much larger and stronger than themselves, Blake said, her voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. They would follow a mammoth for days, never letting it rest, never letting it recover. They'd track it across hundreds of miles until it collapsed from exhaustion. Lieutenant Tommy Park, monitoring the enemy fleet's movements on his tactical display, looked up from his station. And then what happened, Captain? Then they moved in for the kill. Not because they were stronger or faster than their prey, but because they never stopped hunting. That persistence made our species the apex predator on Earth, and it's what's going to make us the apex predator in this galaxy. The human strategy was unlike anything the Vorthak had ever encountered. Instead of seeking decisive battles, human fleets would appear at the edge of a star system, engage enemy forces just long enough to inflict damage, and then jump to hyperspace before the Vorthak could bring their full strength to bear. By the time reinforcements arrived, the humans would be gone, only to appear somewhere else entirely and repeat the process. Rebecca Torres, now commanding the overall human offensive from her flagship Apex, watched the strategic displays. That showed the steady erosion of Vorthak military power across dozens of star systems. The enemy was losing ships faster than they could replace them, and their morale was beginning to collapse under the constant pressure. Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from 3 more Vorthak fleet commanders, reported her communications officer. They're requesting terms for laying down their weapons. Torres considered this for a moment, then shook her head. Negative. Tell them they can surrender when their government agrees to our terms for ending this war. Individual fleet surrenders are not acceptable. The strategy was psychological as much as military. By refusing to accept partial surrenders, humanity was demonstrating that this war would not end until the Vorthak Empire as a whole admitted defeat. There would be no negotiated peace, no face-saving compromises, no opportunity for the enemy to regroup and try again later. Commander Alex Rivera, leading a squadron of fast attack ships deep in Vorthak territory, had been hunting the same enemy fleet for over a week. His ships would appear at the edge of sensor range, launch a quick strike, and disappear before the Vorthak could respond effectively. The enemy commander was becoming increasingly desperate, making tactical errors that Rivera's experienced crews exploited ruthlessly. Sir, the enemy fleet is changing course again, reported his tactical officer. They're heading for the Zephyr system, probably hoping to link up with the garrison there. Rivera smiled, recognizing the pattern. They're thinking like prey now, looking for safety in numbers instead of trying to fight. Signal the fleet. We'll let them reach Zephyr, then hit both forces while they're trying to coordinate their defenses. Won't that give them a significant numerical advantage, sir? Numbers only matter if you're planning to fight a traditional battle, Rivera replied. We're not here to defeat them in glorious combat. We're here to exhaust them until they can't fight anymore. The pursuit continued for another 3 days. Rivera's ships appeared and disappeared like hunting wolves, always staying just out of reach but never letting their prey escape or rest. By the time the Vorthak fleet reached Zephyr, both the pursuing and pursued forces were showing signs of strain, but the humans had trained for exactly this type of extended operation. What the Vorthak hadn't realized was that human crews could maintain combat operations far longer than most alien species. Humanity's evolutionary background as persistence hunters had given them not just the mental determination to continue fighting, but the physical endurance to maintain peak performance under stress for extended periods. The engagement at Zephyr lasted for 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of both Vorthak fleets. Rivera's ships had used their superior coordination and tactical flexibility to turn the enemy's numerical advantage against them, forcing the two Vorthak formations to interfere with each other while human squadrons picked them apart piece by piece. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surviving Vorthak commander," Rivera's communications officer reported. "Put it through." The alien's voice was filled with exhaustion and something that sounded very much like defeat. "Human commander, my fleet is finished. We cannot continue fighting. What do you want from us?" Rivera's response was calm and professional, but it carried an undertone that left no doubt about humanity's intentions. "We want you to understand that this war will continue until your empire surrenders unconditionally. Every day you keep fighting, more of your ships will be destroyed and more of your people will die. We will never stop hunting you." "But why?" the Vorthak commander asked. "We've already lost." "Our military cannot defeat your forces. What more do you want?" "We want to make sure that no alien species ever again makes the mistake of thinking that humans are weak because we prefer peace. We want the galaxy to understand that when someone forces us to fight, we don't stop until the threat is completely eliminated." The transmission ended, and Rivera turned his attention to the next phase of operations. His squadron would continue deeper into Vorthak space, hunting more enemy fleets and grinding down what remained of their military resistance. Captain Lisa Shun, operating with a different human fleet in another sector, had been conducting similar operations for months. Her ships had covered thousands of light years, appearing in dozens of star systems and engaging enemy forces whenever they could be found. The strain of constant combat was beginning to show on alien crews throughout the Vorthak Empire, but human forces seemed to grow more efficient and coordinated with each passing day. "Captain, we're receiving intelligence reports that several Vorthak colony worlds are requesting protection from their own military," her intelligence officer reported. "Apparently they're afraid their fleets will attract human attention to their systems." Chun nodded, recognizing the signs that the enemy's will to resist was finally breaking. "That's the beginning of the end. Once a population starts seeing their own military as a liability rather than protection, the war is essentially over." "How long do you think it will take, sir?" "Not much longer." The Vorthak military was built for quick, decisive campaigns against enemies who would eventually surrender or negotiate. They have no idea how to fight a war of attrition against an enemy that will never quit. Chun was right. Within 2 weeks, the Vorthak government was broadcasting surrender offers on all frequencies, begging for negotiations that would end the relentless human offensive. Their military forces were scattered and demoralized, their economy was collapsing under the strain of constant warfare, and their population was demanding an end to a conflict that seemed to have no purpose beyond mutual destruction. But humanity's response was exactly what it had been from the beginning. The war would end when the Vorthak Empire surrendered unconditionally, not before. There would be no negotiations, no compromises, no face-saving measures that might encourage other species to test human resolve in the future. The persistence hunt would continue until the prey finally collapsed from exhaustion. Just as it had for millions of years on Earth, the only difference was that now, the hunting ground was an entire galaxy. The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council had never hosted a session like this one. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the vast space, their conversations creating a low buzz of nervous energy that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. At the center of it all stood the reason for this emergency gathering, a simple podium where the most feared being in the galaxy would soon address the assembled civilizations. Ambassador Krell of the former Vorthak Empire waited in the prisoners' section, his once proud reptilian form now marked by the weight of total defeat. The scales that had once shimmered with confidence were now dull and gray, and his yellow eyes held the haunted look of someone who had witnessed something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of power. The chamber fell silent as President Elena Rodriguez entered, flanked by Admiral Rebecca Torres and General Patricia Stone. The human delegation moved with the confident stride of apex predators, who knew they stood at the top of the galactic food chain, and every alien in the chamber could feel the shift in the cosmic order that their presence represented. Rodriguez took her place at the central podium and looked out over the assembled representatives with eyes that had seen the rise of a new galactic empire. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner of the vast chamber, and her words would reshape the political landscape of the entire galaxy. "Honored representatives," Rodriguez began, her tone carrying the calm authority of someone who no longer needed to prove her power. "We are here today to discuss the new reality that has emerged from the recent conflict with the Vorthak Empire." Counselor Zeth of the Manthari Collective was the first to speak, his insectoid features twitching with barely controlled anxiety. "President Rodriguez, the Vorthak Empire has surrendered unconditionally. Surely this matter is resolved." Rodriguez's smile was polite but held no warmth, the expression of someone explaining obvious facts to those who had failed to grasp their significance. "The surrender of the Vorthak military forces is indeed complete. However, that represents only the beginning of the changes that will now take place throughout this galaxy." "What changes?" asked the melodious voice of the Luxari delegation, their crystalline forms resonating with harmonics that betrayed their nervousness. "The changes that occur when a new apex predator establishes its territory," General Stone interjected, stepping forward to address the assembly. "For thousands of years, this galaxy has operated under a system where the strong prey upon the weak. That system has now ended." Admiral Torres activated a holographic display that showed the current political map of the galaxy. Red zones marked former Vorthak territory, now under human administration. Blue zones showed established human space. Yellow zones indicated regions where human fleets were currently providing security and protection services. "As you can see," Torres explained, "humanity now controls or protects nearly 40% of galactic civilization. This is not temporary. This is the new permanent structure of galactic politics." The chamber erupted in nervous chatter as representatives began to understand the implications of what they were hearing. The humans were not simply claiming victory over the Vorthak Empire. They were announcing their intention to reshape the entire galactic order according to their own principles. Counselor Vex of the Ethereal Collective floated forward in his containment suit, his whispered voice somehow carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Are you claiming dominion over the galaxy?" "No," Rodriguez replied firmly. "We are claiming responsibility for it. There's a significant difference." She gestured toward the prisoners section where Krell waited under guard. "Ambassador Krell, please share with the Council what you learned about human nature during our recent conflict." Krell rose slowly, his movements showing the weight of absolute defeat. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the arrogant confidence that had once characterized Vorthak diplomacy. "They are not what we thought," Krell said, his words barely above a whisper. "We believed humans feared war because they spoke of peace and negotiation. We were wrong. They spoke of peace because they knew what they would become if forced to fight. And what did we become?" Rodriguez asked. Krell's yellow eyes met hers, and for a moment the chamber could see the terror that lurked behind his defeated expression. "You became what you always were, the perfect predator. You don't fight for conquest or glory or resources. You fight for survival, and you will do anything to ensure your species continues." "Elaborate for the Council," Stone ordered. They plan. Every move decades in advance, they adapt to any situation. They coordinate without apparent communication. They never stop hunting once they decide something is a threat. And they never show mercy to enemies who threaten their pack? The chamber fell completely silent as the implications of Krell's words sank in. Every species present had built their military philosophy around concepts of honor, glory, or territorial expansion. The idea of fighting purely for species survival, with no regard for individual glory or cultural values, was something most of them couldn't even comprehend. The old galactic order, Rodriguez continued, was based on the assumption that military conflicts would eventually end in negotiated settlements that allowed all parties to maintain some degree of dignity and independence. Humanity does not operate under those assumptions. What are your terms? Asked the representative of the Granite Collective, his voice rumbling through the stone-like physiology that made his species nearly indestructible in conventional warfare. Simple, Torres replied. Any species that threatens human civilians, human colonies, or human allies will face the complete destruction of their military capability and the occupation of their territory until we are satisfied that the threat has been permanently eliminated. And any species that preys upon weaker civilizations will find themselves classified as a threat to galactic stability, Stone added. We will not tolerate predatory behavior from any source. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not simply establishing itself as another galactic power. They were announcing their intention to serve as the galaxy's ultimate arbiters of acceptable behavior, with the military capability to enforce their decisions regardless of what other species thought about it. Captain David Martinez, now promoted to admiral and serving as humanity's chief diplomatic representative, stepped forward to address the more practical aspects of the new order. The transition period will be managed carefully, Martinez explained. Species that demonstrate peaceful intentions and respect for the rights of other civilizations will be granted full autonomy within the new system. Those that continue to operate under the old predatory model will find their options increasingly limited. This is tyranny, declared the representative of the militant Kronos Federation. You cannot simply impose your will on the entire galaxy? Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Admiral Torres, please remind our colleague of the current status of the Kronos military. Torres consulted her datapad with professional efficiency. The Kronos Federation's fleet was engaged by human forces 6 days ago after they attempted to raid civilian shipping in the Tau sector. Their military capability has been reduced by 93%. The surviving ships are currently under human escort to designated disarmament facilities. The choice, Rodriguez continued, is simple. You can adapt to the new reality where the strong protect the weak instead of preying upon them, or you can discover what happened to every other species that decided to test human resolve. The session continued for several more hours as the full scope of humanity's new galactic order was explained to the assembled representatives. There would be no negotiations, no compromises, no gradual transition period. The galaxy now had a new apex predator, and that predator had very specific ideas about how civilized species should behave toward one another. The session ended and representatives began to file out of the chamber. Many could be heard discussing the same question. How had they so completely misunderstood the nature of humanity? The answer was simple, though few of them would ever truly comprehend it. For 50 years, they had observed human diplomatic behavior and assumed it represented human nature. They had seen the surface without understanding what lay beneath it. Humans had never feared war. They had feared themselves, knowing that once they stopped pretending to be civilized diplomats and revealed their true nature as persistence hunters, there would be no going back to the comfortable illusion of galactic peace. Now that the mask had been removed, the galaxy would learn to live under the protection of its new apex predator. Those who accepted the new order would find themselves safer than they had ever been before. Those who challenged it would discover that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat. When something they cared about was threatened, the age of predatory empires was over. The age of human protection had begun, and it would last until some other species proved capable of taking the crown away from Earth's children, given what the galaxy had just witnessed. That seemed unlikely to happen anytime soon.